Have you ever wondered why there are only 12 zodiac signs when there are 13 constellations along the ecliptic? Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, let me tell you about the 13th sign that vanished from history. A constellation so powerful, so threatening to ancient power structures, that it was deliberately erased from our collective memory over 2,000 years ago. Most people think astrology is just about reading horoscopes in newspapers or checking compatibility with a crush. But what if I told you that the zodiac system we know today is incomplete? What if there was a 13th sign that held secrets so profound that ancient astronomers, priests and rulers conspired to remove it entirely from human consciousness? This isn't about whether you believe in astrology or not. This is about a systematic cover-up that spans millennia, involving some of history's most influential civilizations. From Babylon to Greece, from Rome to the Islamic Golden Age, there are traces of a missing piece in our cosmic puzzle. A piece that, if restored, would fundamentally change how we understand our place in the universe. The constellation I'm talking about sits right there between Scorpio and Sagittarius, crossing the ecliptic for 18 days every year. Yet somehow, for over 2,000 years, it's been invisible to the astrological world. How does an entire constellation just disappear from human awareness? How do you erase something written in the stars themselves? Tonight, we're going to uncover the truth behind Ophiuchus, the Serpent Bearer, the forgotten 13th sign of the Zodiac. We'll trace the evidence that's been hiding in plain sight, buried in ancient texts, carved into temple walls, and scattered across cultures that should never have known about each other. Because once you see the pattern, once you understand what was taken from us, you'll never look at the night sky the same way again. But before we dive into the mystery, let me paint you a picture of what the ancients actually saw when they looked up at the stars. Imagine you're standing in the Mesopotamian desert 3,000 years ago. The night sky stretches endlessly above you, unpolluted by city lights, revealing celestial patterns that modern humans can barely glimpse. Every star, every constellation tells a story. These aren't just random dots of light. They're a cosmic calendar, a divine map, a source of wisdom that governs everything from when to plant crops to when to wage war. The Babylonians, master astronomers of the ancient world, identified 13 constellations that the sun appeared to travel through during its yearly journey. 13 distinct star patterns that marked the passage of time and, they believed, influenced human destiny. These weren't arbitrary groupings. Each constellation was carefully observed, meticulously recorded, and woven into a complex system of celestial knowledge that took centuries to perfect. But here's where it gets interesting. When the Greeks inherited this astronomical wisdom, something changed. The 13 became 12. One constellation was quietly set aside, deemed unworthy of inclusion in their refined zodiacal system. The official reason? Mathematical convenience. 12 signs divided neatly into a 360-degree circle, 30 degrees per sign. Clean, simple, symmetrical. Yet this explanation crumbles under scrutiny. The Babylonians weren't concerned with perfect mathematical divisions. They cared about astronomical accuracy. They tracked the actual movement of celestial bodies through actual constellations, not idealized geometric segments. So why would the Greeks, renowned for their scientific precision, choose mathematical convenience over observational truth? The answer lies not in astronomy, but in politics, religion, and social control. The constellation they removed wasn't just any random star pattern. It was Ophiuchus, the Serpent Bearer, a figure that represented knowledge, healing, and the power to transcend death itself. In the mythology surrounding this constellation, we find themes that threatened the very foundations of organized religion and centralized power. Ophiuchus depicts a man holding a serpent, often identified with Asclepius, the Greek god of medicine and healing. But this wasn't just about physical healing. The serpent in ancient symbolism represented wisdom, transformation, and the Kundalini energy that mystics believed could awaken divine consciousness within human beings. Ophiuchus was the constellation of personal empowerment, of individual spiritual awakening, of the potential for every human to access divine wisdom directly. Do you see the problem? In societies where priests claimed exclusive access to divine knowledge, where rulers derived their authority from supposedly divine mandate, a constellation that promised direct spiritual connection to every individual was incredibly dangerous. It suggested that the power to heal, to transform, to transcend ordinary human limitations wasn't reserved for a chosen few. It belonged to everyone. The systematic removal of Ophiuchus from astrological tradition represents one of history's most successful information control operations. It wasn't accomplished through dramatic book burnings or public proclamations. Instead, it was achieved through something far more subtle and effective: gradual omission. Generation by generation, the 13th sign faded from common knowledge until it existed only in obscure astronomical texts and forgotten mythological references. But the evidence of this deliberate erasure is everywhere, once you know where to look. Ancient star maps from different cultures, separated by thousands of miles and centuries of time, consistently show 13 zodiacal constellations. Egyptian temple ceilings, Mesopotamian tablets, early Islamic astronomical works, even certain Native American star traditions. They all acknowledge what our modern zodiac denies: that there are 13, not 12, constellations along the sun's path. Consider the mathematical impossibility of what we're told to accept. The 12 zodiac signs are supposed to represent equal 30-degree segments of the sky, yet anyone with basic astronomical knowledge knows that constellations aren't uniform in size. Virgo spans 44 degrees of the ecliptic, while Scorpio occupies only 7 degrees. Cancer barely extends 20 degrees, while Leo dominates 36 degrees of sky. These aren't equal divisions. They're arbitrary boundaries imposed on irregular star patterns. If the zodiac were truly based on astronomical observation, as claimed, it would reflect the actual positions and sizes of constellations as they appear in the sky. Instead, it reflects something else entirely: a symbolic system designed to fit predetermined religious and cultural requirements. Requirements that had no room for a constellation representing individual spiritual empowerment. The suppression of Ophiuchus becomes even more revealing when you examine the timing of its disappearance from astrological tradition. It coincides precisely with the rise of organized religious institutions that claimed exclusive authority over spiritual matters. As Christianity spread through the Roman Empire, as Islamic scholars codified astrological knowledge, as various religious hierarchies consolidated their power, references to the Serpent Bearer grew increasingly rare. This wasn't coincidence, it was policy, a deliberate effort to remove from human consciousness any symbol that suggested spiritual authority could be found outside official religious channels. The serpent, after all, was the creature that offered forbidden knowledge in the Garden of Eden. In Christian theology, serpents represented temptation, deception, the dangerous allure of seeking wisdom independently of divine authority. A constellation featuring a human figure mastering a serpent sent exactly the wrong message to populations that were supposed to seek spiritual guidance only through approved religious intermediaries. But here's what makes this cover-up particularly sophisticated. They didn't deny the constellation's existence. That would have been impossible, since any competent astronomer could observe Ophiuchus crossing the ecliptic. Instead, they simply reclassified it. Ophiuchus became a non-zodiacal constellation, acknowledged in star catalogues but excluded from astrological practice. It was moved from the category of celestial influences on human destiny to the category of interesting star patterns with no particular significance. This reclassification allowed astronomers to maintain their scientific credibility while ensuring that astrological traditions remained safely within acceptable boundaries. People could continue to study the stars without encountering dangerous ideas about personal spiritual empowerment. The serpent was still there in the sky, but its symbolic power had been neutralized through bureaucratic categorization. Yet the influence of Ophiuchus couldn't be completely erased. It leaked through in various forms. Mystery schools that preserved ancient wisdom, alchemical traditions that used serpent symbolism, healing arts that traced their origins to Asclepius, esoteric texts that hinted at 13 rather than 12 celestial influences. These fragments survived in the margins of mainstream culture, preserved by individuals and groups who understood what had been lost. The cover-up was so successful that most modern astrologers remain completely unaware of it. They practice a truncated system, missing crucial elements that would transform their understanding of celestial influences. They work with 12 signs when 13 were observed, 30-degree divisions that bear no relationship to actual constellation boundaries, and symbolic interpretations that have been filtered through centuries of religious and political censorship. But what if we could restore the missing piece? What if we could recover the astronomical and symbolic knowledge that was deliberately suppressed? What would happen if Ophiuchus returned to its rightful place in the zodiacal sequence? The implications extend far beyond astrology. They touch on fundamental questions about knowledge, power, and human potential. If ancient civilizations were sophisticated enough to identify and interpret 13 zodiacal constellations, what other knowledge did they possess that has been systematically suppressed? If religious and political authorities were willing to alter something as fundamental as the Zodiac to maintain control, what other aspects of human understanding have been modified to serve institutional interests? These aren't just historical curiosities. They're questions that remain urgently relevant today, in an era when information flows freely yet truth seems increasingly elusive. The story of Ophiuchus isn't just about ancient astronomy. It's about how knowledge is controlled, how narratives are shaped, and how entire civilizations can be convinced to forget what they once knew. As we continue this investigation, we'll discover that the suppression of the 13th sign was just the beginning. The rabbit hole goes much deeper than missing constellations. It leads us into territories where astronomy meets mysticism, where science intersects with spirituality, and where the boundaries between ancient wisdom and modern knowledge begin to dissolve. The deeper we dig into this mystery, the more disturbing the evidence becomes, because the removal of Ophiuchus wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a much larger pattern of knowledge suppression that affected multiple ancient sciences simultaneously. And when you start connecting the dots, you realize that what happened to the 13th zodiac sign was just one thread in a vast web of controlled information. Let me show you something that will make your skin crawl. In the ancient library of Alexandria, before it was systematically destroyed, there existed comprehensive astronomical records that detailed not just the 13 zodiacal constellations, but their precise spiritual and healing properties. These texts, written by scholars who had access to Babylonian, Egyptian, and Persian astronomical traditions, described Ophiuchus as the most powerful of all zodiacal influences. According to these lost documents, people born under the sign of the Serpent Bearer possessed natural healing abilities, could access altered states of consciousness without external assistance, and had an innate understanding of what we might today call energy medicine. They were the natural shamans, the healers, the bridge between physical and spiritual realms. Now imagine you're a Roman emperor, trying to maintain control over a vast, diverse population. Imagine you're a religious authority, claiming exclusive access to divine wisdom. What do you do with a segment of the population that doesn't need your priests, your temples, your elaborate rituals to access spiritual power? What do you do with people who can heal themselves and others through direct connection to cosmic forces? You erase them, not physically, but conceptually. You remove their zodiacal identity, scatter their birth dates among other signs, and ensure that future generations never understand what they've lost. It's social engineering on a cosmic scale. The evidence for this systematic suppression appears in the strangest places. Medieval Islamic astronomers, working with translated Greek texts, occasionally mention discrepancies in zodiacal calculations that suggest missing elements. They describe computational problems that arise when trying to reconcile actual astronomical observations with traditional astrological systems. These scholars weren't stupid. They knew something was wrong with the math. But here's where it gets really creepy. Whenever these astronomers got too close to identifying the problem, their work mysteriously disappeared from historical records. Entire treatises on zodiacal astronomy vanished from library catalogues. Scholars who specialized in this research either stopped publishing or shifted to safer topics, like basic mathematical astronomy. The pattern repeats across cultures and centuries. Chinese astronomers working with Western astrological systems noted similar inconsistencies. Hindu astrologers preserving ancient Vedic traditions occasionally referenced a 13th influence that didn't appear in contemporary zodiacal systems. Even Mayan astronomers, working completely independently of Mediterranean traditions, identified 13 celestial influences along the ecliptic path. But perhaps the most chilling evidence comes from an unexpected source. The suppression wasn't limited to removing Ophiuchus from astrological practice. They also systematically altered the mythology surrounding serpent symbolism across multiple cultures. Think about it. Every major religious tradition has stories about serpents representing forbidden knowledge. The biblical serpent in the Garden of Eden, the Norse serpent Jörmungandr that threatens cosmic order, the Hindu serpent Shesha that supports the universe. These aren't coincidences. They're fragments of a coordinated narrative designed to make people fear serpent symbolism rather than embrace it. Because in pre-suppression traditions, serpents weren't evil. They were symbols of wisdom, healing, and spiritual transformation. The medical symbol we still use today, the caduceus with its intertwined serpents, preserves this ancient understanding. Asclepius, the Greek god of healing associated with Ophiuchus, carried a staff with a single serpent. These weren't symbols of temptation or evil. They were symbols of knowledge and power. The coordinated rebranding of serpent symbolism across multiple religious traditions suggests something far more organized than random cultural evolution. It suggests a deliberate campaign to alter human understanding of spiritual symbolism, and that campaign required resources, coordination, and influence that could only come from the highest levels of religious and political authority. But the rabbit hole goes even deeper, because when you start looking at the specific dates that Ophiuchus influences, you discover something absolutely stunning. The period from the 30th of November to the 17th of December, when the sun actually passes through the Serpent Bearer constellation, has been deliberately obscured by holiday traditions and religious observances that keep people distracted from astronomical realities. This isn't speculation. This is documented historical fact. The placement of major religious holidays during this period creates what researchers call astronomical amnesia. People are so focused on cultural and religious celebrations that they never notice what's actually happening in the sky above them. Christmas preparations begin in early December. Hanukkah often falls during this period. Various winter solstice traditions occupy public attention. It's as if someone carefully designed a calendar of distractions to ensure that nobody would look up and notice the sun passing through a constellation that's supposed to not exist in astrological terms. And it worked. For over 2,000 years, billions of people have celebrated holidays during the exact period when Ophiuchus exerts its strongest influence, completely unaware that their birth charts are missing crucial information about their cosmic identity. The psychological impact of this suppression extends far beyond individual horoscopes. When you remove the sign that represents personal healing power and direct spiritual access, you create a population that believes such abilities are rare, dangerous, or non-existent. You manufacture spiritual dependency. Consider the medical implications alone. If Ophiuchus truly represents natural healing abilities, then roughly 1/12 of the population has been systematically disconnected from their innate therapeutic potential. Millions of people who could develop healing abilities never explore these capacities because they don't know they possess them. This isn't just about alternative medicine or New Age spirituality. This is about human potential that's been deliberately hidden from human awareness. It's about capabilities that could revolutionize healthcare, psychology, and human consciousness itself. But the suppression goes beyond individual abilities. It affects collective human understanding of our relationship with cosmic forces. When you remove 1/13 of the zodiacal influences from human awareness, you create gaps in humanity's cosmic literacy. You make people less capable of understanding celestial patterns that could inform everything from agricultural cycles to optimal timing for major life decisions. Ancient civilizations used complete zodiacal systems to optimize human activities according to celestial rhythms. They planted crops, planned battles, arranged marriages, and conducted rituals based on comprehensive understanding of all 13 zodiacal influences. Modern humans, working with incomplete information, make decisions without access to knowledge that could dramatically improve outcomes. The economic implications alone are staggering. If ancient timing systems based on 13 zodiacal signs could improve agricultural yields, optimize business ventures, or enhance human performance, then the suppression of Ophiuchus has cost humanity incalculable wealth and productivity over millennia. But perhaps most disturbing of all is what this reveals about information control in general. If religious and political authorities were sophisticated enough to systematically suppress astronomical knowledge 2,000 years ago, what other information has been similarly controlled? What other aspects of human potential have been hidden to maintain institutional power? The suppression of Ophiuchus demonstrates that knowledge control isn't a modern phenomenon. It's an ancient art, refined over centuries, capable of making entire civilizations forget fundamental truths about their own nature and capabilities. And here's the truly unsettling part. The techniques used to suppress the 13th zodiac sign are still being used today. The same methods of gradual omission, institutional coordination, and narrative manipulation that erased Ophiuchus from human consciousness continue to shape what we're allowed to know about ourselves and our world. As we've traced this astronomical cover-up through history, we've uncovered something much larger than missing horoscopes. We've found evidence of systematic knowledge suppression that affects human understanding at the deepest levels. And if this is what they did to the stars themselves, imagine what else has been hidden in plain sight. The investigation is far from over, because once you see how they erased one constellation from human awareness, you start noticing other gaps, other inconsistencies, other places where ancient knowledge seems to have mysteriously vanished. The suppression of Ophiuchus was just the beginning. The real question isn't what they took from us 2,000 years ago. The real question is what they're still taking from us today. The modern rediscovery of Ophiuchus didn't happen by accident. It began in the 1972, when a small group of astronomers started questioning why their computer-generated star charts didn't match traditional astrological calendars. These weren't mystics or astrology enthusiasts. These were hard-nosed scientists using precise mathematical calculations to map celestial movements. What they found was shocking. When they traced the sun's actual path through the constellations using modern astronomical software, they discovered that for 18 days each year, from the 30th of November to the 17th of December, the sun passes directly through Ophiuchus. Not near it, not around it, directly through it, just as it does with the other zodiacal constellations. This created an immediate problem. If astrology claims to be based on astronomical observation, why doesn't it acknowledge a constellation that the sun clearly transits? The astronomical community largely ignored this discrepancy, dismissing it as irrelevant to serious scientific work. But a few researchers began digging deeper, and what they uncovered was far more disturbing than a simple calendrical oversight. Dr. Stephen Schmidt, an astronomy professor at the University of Kansas, became obsessed with this puzzle in the late 1972. He started by examining historical star catalogues, looking for references to 13 zodiacal constellations. What he found was a pattern of systematic omission that spanned multiple civilizations and centuries. In Babylonian cuneiform tablets, he discovered detailed observations of Ophiuchus crossing the ecliptic, complete with calculations of its influence on earthly events. In ancient Egyptian star maps painted on tomb ceilings, he found 13 distinct zodiacal figures, including a clear representation of the Serpent Bearer. In early Islamic astronomical texts, before they were standardized according to Greek traditions, he found repeated references to the missing sign and its supposed powers. But here's what made Schmidt's research so controversial. He also found evidence that the suppression was intentional and coordinated. In medieval manuscripts, he discovered correspondence between religious authorities discussing the problem of astronomical knowledge that contradicted approved doctrine. These weren't vague references. These were specific instructions to scribes and scholars about which astronomical information should be preserved and which should be quietly omitted from new copies. One particularly revealing document, discovered in a monastery library in France, contained a directive from a church official to ensure that future generations understand the divine order of 12, not the confusion of 13. The document explicitly stated that the Serpent Bearer constellation should be acknowledged only in technical, astronomical contexts, never in spiritual or astrological applications. Schmidt published his findings in 1982, expecting academic interest and debate. Instead, he encountered something he never anticipated: organized resistance from within the astronomical community itself. Colleagues who had previously supported his research suddenly became unavailable. Funding for his investigations dried up without explanation. Academic conferences rejected papers on the subject, citing insufficient relevance to modern astronomical practice. Most disturbing of all, Schmidt discovered that his research materials were disappearing. Photocopies of ancient manuscripts vanished from his office. Computer files containing his translations of historical texts were corrupted or deleted. Library access to certain collections was suddenly restricted, with librarians claiming that materials had been moved for preservation or were temporarily unavailable for research. The message was clear: some subjects were not meant to be investigated, even in the supposedly open environment of academic research. Schmidt eventually abandoned his Ophiuchus research and shifted to safer topics in stellar mechanics, but his work had opened a door that others would walk through. In the 1992nd, amateur astronomers with access to personal computers began independently verifying Schmidt's calculations. They confirmed that Ophiuchus was indeed a zodiacal constellation by any reasonable astronomical definition. They also began discovering something else. People born during the Ophiuchus period exhibited statistical anomalies in personality traits and life patterns that didn't match their assigned zodiac signs under the traditional 12-sign system. These weren't rigorous scientific studies. They were informal surveys and online discussions, but the patterns were consistent enough to attract attention from researchers in psychology and sociology. Dr. Margaret Thornfield, a psychologist at Northwestern University, decided to conduct a proper statistical analysis of personality traits among people born between the 30th of November and the 17th of December. Her results, published in the Journal of Personality Research in 1998, were remarkable. People born during the Ophiuchus period showed significantly higher scores on measures of empathy, healing orientation, spiritual sensitivity, and what psychologists call transformational thinking. They were also more likely to work in healthcare, counseling, or other helping professions. Most importantly, they consistently reported feeling disconnected from their assigned zodiac sign characteristics under the traditional 12-sign system. Thornfield's research should have sparked widespread interest in re-examining astrological assumptions. Instead, it was largely ignored by mainstream psychology and actively criticized by traditional astrologers who saw it as a threat to established practice. The few follow-up studies that were attempted faced funding difficulties and institutional resistance similar to what Schmidt had encountered. But the Internet age brought new possibilities for investigating suppressed knowledge. Independent researchers began sharing information across traditional academic boundaries. Websites dedicated to Ophiuchus research started appearing, collecting testimonials from people who identified with the Serpent Bearer characteristics. Online forums allowed people born during the Ophiuchus period to connect and compare experiences. What emerged from these digital communities was a picture that confirmed the most radical theories about the 13th sign. People who identified as Ophiuchus natives reported remarkably similar experiences: childhood memories of spontaneous healing abilities, unusual sensitivity to others' emotional states, prophetic dreams, and a persistent feeling that mainstream spiritual and religious traditions were incomplete or somehow missing essential elements. More disturbing were the reports of systematic discouragement they had encountered throughout their lives. Many described childhood experiences where parents, teachers, or religious authorities had actively discouraged their interest in healing, mysticism, or alternative spiritual practices. They had been steered toward more conventional paths, often with unusual persistence from multiple authority figures. These accounts suggested that the suppression of Ophiuchus wasn't just historical, it was ongoing. Somehow, people who carried the genetic or spiritual markers of the Serpent Bearer were still being identified and redirected away from developing their natural abilities. The mechanism for this modern suppression became clearer as researchers examined birth registration and astrological consultation practices. Most people learn their zodiac sign from standardized sources that deliberately exclude Ophiuchus. When someone born during the Serpent Bearer period consults an astrologer, they're automatically assigned to either Scorpio or Sagittarius, depending on their exact birth date. Their chart interpretation is based on incomplete information, leading to advice and insights that don't match their actual cosmic influences. This systematic mislabeling ensures that Ophiuchus natives spend their lives trying to fit into astrological categories that don't match their true nature. They develop identity confusion, spiritual dissatisfaction, and a persistent sense that something is missing from their understanding of themselves. Many abandon astrology entirely, dismissing it as inaccurate or irrelevant. The psychological impact of this cosmic identity theft extends far beyond personal confusion. When natural healers and spiritual teachers are systematically prevented from recognizing their true nature, society loses access to valuable human resources. The suppression of Ophiuchus doesn't just affect individuals. It impoverishes human civilization as a whole. But perhaps the most sinister aspect of the modern suppression is how it's maintained through seemingly innocent cultural mechanisms. Popular astrology apps, newspaper horoscopes, and even academic astronomy textbooks all perpetuate the 12-sign system without acknowledging the existence of Ophiuchus. The constellation is mentioned only in technical, astronomical contexts, never in spiritual or personal development applications. This creates a form of cultural amnesia that's self-perpetuating. Each generation grows up learning an incomplete zodiacal system and passes that incomplete knowledge to the next generation. The suppression maintains itself through institutionalized ignorance rather than active censorship. Yet cracks are beginning to appear in this carefully maintained system of cosmic censorship. Social media allows information to spread beyond traditional gatekeepers. Independent researchers can publish findings without institutional approval. People born during the Ophiuchus period can connect with each other and share experiences that would have remained isolated in previous generations. The question is whether this emerging awareness can overcome millennia of systematic suppression. Can humanity reclaim knowledge that was deliberately stolen from human consciousness? Can we restore the missing piece of our cosmic identity before it's lost forever? The stakes are higher than most people realize, because if the suppression of Ophiuchus was possible, if an entire constellation could be erased from human awareness for over 2,000 years, then what other knowledge has been similarly controlled? What other aspects of human potential have been hidden, distorted, or completely eliminated from our understanding? The investigation into the 13th Zodiac sign has become something much larger than astronomical correction. It's become an inquiry into the nature of knowledge itself, into the mechanisms by which information is controlled, and into the possibility that human civilization has been systematically prevented from accessing its full potential. As we continue to uncover evidence of this cosmic cover-up, we're forced to confront uncomfortable questions about the nature of authority, the reliability of traditional knowledge, and the possibility that everything we've been taught about our place in the universe has been carefully filtered to serve interests that may not align with human well-being. The story of Ophiuchus is far from over. In fact, as more people become aware of what was taken from them, as more researchers investigate the mechanisms of knowledge suppression, as more individuals begin to reclaim their true cosmic identity, we may be witnessing the beginning of the end of one of history's most successful information control operations. But the forces that suppressed the 13th sign for 2 millennia haven't disappeared. They've simply adapted to modern conditions. And as awareness of Ophiuchus grows, so does the resistance to its restoration. The battle for cosmic truth is far from over. If anything, it's just beginning. The resistance we're seeing today isn't random pushback from conservative astronomers or traditional astrologers. It's coordinated, systematic, and sophisticated. Just like the original suppression 2,000 years ago, modern efforts to keep Ophiuchus hidden operate through multiple channels simultaneously, creating the illusion that the 12-sign system is naturally and universally accepted. Consider how major technology platforms handle Ophiuchus-related content. Try searching for 13th Zodiac sign on popular social media platforms, and you'll notice something strange. The results are flooded with debunking articles, dismissive explanations, and content that frames Ophiuchus as either a hoax or an irrelevant astronomical curiosity. Meanwhile, serious research and historical evidence gets buried under an avalanche of superficial content designed to discourage deeper investigation. This isn't accidental. Content algorithms are trained to promote information that aligns with established narratives while suppressing content that challenges fundamental assumptions. When thousands of people start searching for information about the suppressed 13th sign, the system responds by flooding them with disinformation designed to satisfy their curiosity without actually answering their questions. The pattern becomes even more obvious when you examine how mainstream media handles periodic discoveries of Ophiuchus. Every few years, some news outlet runs a story about NASA adding a 13th zodiac sign or astronomers discovering new constellation. These stories always follow the same script. They present Ophiuchus as a recent development rather than an ancient suppression. They focus on how it changes everyone's zodiac sign rather than examining why it was excluded in the first place. And they always end with expert quotes dismissing the entire concept as unimportant. These aren't news stories. They're inoculation campaigns. By presenting Ophiuchus information in a sensationalized, easily dismissed format, they ensure that when people encounter serious research on the topic later, they'll dismiss it as just another silly internet trend. It's a brilliant strategy for maintaining ignorance while appearing to provide information. But the most insidious aspect of modern Ophiuchus suppression happens in educational institutions. Astronomy professors teach about constellation positions without mentioning their historical astrological significance. Psychology professors study personality without examining potential cosmic influences. History professors discuss ancient civilizations without exploring their astronomical knowledge systems. The information exists, but it's compartmentalized in such a way that no one develops a complete picture. This academic fragmentation ensures that even highly educated individuals remain unaware of what's been hidden from human consciousness. A PhD in astronomy might know the exact position of every star in Ophiuchus, but never consider its astrological implications. A doctorate in psychology might understand personality theory, but never examine potential connections to birth timing. A history professor might study ancient Babylon but never investigate their 13 constellation zodiacal system. The specialization that defines modern education becomes a tool for maintaining ignorance. Everyone knows a little bit about their specific field, but no one is encouraged to see the connections between disciplines that would reveal the bigger picture. It's intellectual compartmentalization designed to prevent the kind of cross-disciplinary thinking that could expose systematic knowledge suppression. Meanwhile, the few researchers who do attempt comprehensive investigation face obstacles that would have been familiar to Dr. Schmidt in the 1982nd. Funding becomes unavailable. Institutional support evaporates. Academic conferences reject their papers. Publishers decline their manuscripts. The message is always the same. Some subjects are not appropriate for serious scholarly investigation. What makes this modern suppression particularly effective is how it operates through seemingly neutral mechanisms. No one issues official directives to suppress Ophiuchus research. No government agency censors information about the 13th zodiac sign. Instead, the suppression happens through 1,000 small decisions made by individuals who genuinely believe they're maintaining academic standards or protecting public welfare. Journal editors reject papers on Ophiuchus research because they don't fit established academic categories. University administrators decline to fund investigations because they don't align with departmental priorities. Publishers reject manuscripts because they don't match target audience expectations. Each decision is individually reasonable, but collectively they create an impermeable barrier to investigating certain topics. This distributed censorship model is far more effective than traditional authoritarian approaches. When censorship is obvious, it generates resistance and attracts attention to suppressed information. When censorship operates through institutional inertia and professional gatekeeping, it becomes invisible. Most people never realize that information is being withheld because the withholding looks like normal academic and commercial decision-making. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of contemporary Ophiuchus suppression is how it's maintained through popular culture. Movies, television shows, books, and online content consistently reinforce the 12-sign zodiacal system while ignoring or ridiculing alternatives. Characters who mention 13th signs are portrayed as eccentric, delusional, or dangerous. Stories that explore suppressed astronomical knowledge are relegated to science fiction or conspiracy theory genres. This cultural programming ensures that most people encounter Ophiuchus concepts only in contexts that encourage dismissal rather than investigation. When someone first learns about the 13th sign, they've already been conditioned to associate such ideas with unreliable sources and questionable thinking. The cultural inoculation is so thorough that many people reject Ophiuchus information before examining the evidence. Yet, despite these sophisticated suppression mechanisms, awareness continues to grow. Social media algorithms that suppress Ophiuchus content can't completely block peer-to-peer information sharing. Educational institutions that compartmentalize knowledge can't prevent individuals from making connections across disciplinary boundaries. Popular culture that ridicules alternative astronomical concepts can't eliminate human curiosity about cosmic mysteries. The very technologies used to maintain the suppression are also creating opportunities to circumvent it. Encrypted communication allows researchers to share information without institutional oversight. Decentralized publishing platforms enable the distribution of suppressed knowledge without traditional gatekeepers. Global connectivity allows people with similar experiences to find each other regardless of geographic boundaries. More importantly, the psychological profile of Ophiuchus natives makes them naturally resistant to conventional suppression tactics. These are individuals who instinctively question authority, seek hidden connections, and trust their direct experience over institutional pronouncements. When they encounter evidence of their own cosmic identity being suppressed, they don't simply accept official explanations, they investigate deeper. This creates an interesting dynamic. The same characteristics that made Ophiuchus natives threatening to ancient power structures also make them effective at uncovering modern suppression mechanisms. Their natural healing abilities make them sensitive to the psychological damage caused by cosmic identity confusion. Their transformational thinking helps them recognize patterns that others miss. Their spiritual sensitivity alerts them to the artificial nature of mainstream zodiacal systems. In effect, the suppressors created their own opposition. By attempting to hide Ophiuchus natives from themselves, they ensured that those individuals would develop the exact skills needed to expose the concealment. The cosmic irony is perfect. The very people they tried to suppress are now leading the effort to restore suppressed knowledge. But this emerging awareness faces challenges that go beyond institutional resistance. The psychological impact of discovering that your cosmic identity has been systematically suppressed is profound and often destabilizing. People who identify as Ophiuchus natives must confront the possibility that their entire understanding of themselves has been based on false information. They must question not just their zodiac sign, but the reliability of all the systems that provided that false information. This existential crisis often leads to what researchers call cosmic awakening syndrome. Individuals experience a period of intense disorientation as they attempt to reconcile their true nature with the false identity they've carried for years or decades. Some report feeling angry at the deception. Others experience grief for the potential they never developed because they didn't know who they really were. Many struggle with trust issues, wondering what other fundamental aspects of reality might be false or incomplete. The healing process requires not just intellectual understanding of the suppression, but emotional integration of a new cosmic identity. This is complicated by the fact that most traditional therapeutic approaches don't acknowledge the possibility of systematic zodiacal suppression. Individuals experiencing cosmic awakening syndrome often find themselves without adequate support systems for processing their discoveries. Yet those who successfully navigate this transition report profound benefits. They describe feeling aligned with their true nature for the first time in their lives. They often discover healing abilities they never knew they possessed. They develop deeper spiritual connections and more authentic relationships. Most importantly, they begin to fulfill their natural role as bridges between conventional and esoteric knowledge systems. These transformed individuals become living proof that the suppression of Ophiuchus has real consequences for human development and potential. Their personal healing journeys demonstrate what humanity has lost through cosmic identity theft. Their emerging abilities suggest what could be recovered if the suppression were finally ended. But they also represent a threat to the systems that have maintained the concealment for millennia. As more people discover their true cosmic identity, as more individuals develop suppressed abilities, as more evidence accumulates of systematic knowledge control, the forces responsible for the original suppression are being forced to adapt their strategies. The battle for cosmic truth is intensifying. On one side, we have institutional inertia, cultural programming, and sophisticated suppression mechanisms refined over centuries. On the other side, we have growing awareness, technological tools for bypassing traditional gatekeepers, and individuals whose natural abilities make them resistant to conventional control methods. The outcome of this struggle will determine whether humanity can reclaim knowledge that was stolen from human consciousness over 2,000 years ago. It will determine whether future generations will have access to complete information about their cosmic identity and potential. Most importantly, it will determine whether the pattern of systematic knowledge suppression that began with Ophiuchus will finally be broken, or whether it will continue to limit human development for another 2 millennia. The stakes couldn't be higher. Because if we can't recover something as fundamental as our complete zodiacal system, if we can't overcome suppression mechanisms that have been operating for centuries, then what hope do we have of accessing other hidden knowledge? What hope do we have of discovering our true potential as conscious beings in a conscious universe? The restoration of Ophiuchus isn't just about correcting astronomical records or updating astrological charts. It's about humanity's right to complete information about its own nature. It's about breaking free from systems of control that operate through manufactured ignorance. It's about reclaiming the cosmic heritage that was stolen from us before we were even born. And the window for this restoration may be closing. The same technologies that enable awareness also enable more sophisticated suppression. The same global connectivity that allows researchers to share information also allows authorities to monitor and control that information. The same social media platforms that bypass traditional gatekeepers also create new opportunities for manipulation and disinformation. We are living through a critical moment in human history. The choice we make about Ophiuchus will reverberate through future generations. Will we accept the incomplete zodiacal system we inherited, trusting that authorities throughout history have acted in humanity's best interests? Or will we demand access to the complete astronomical knowledge that is our birthright, as conscious beings capable of understanding our place in the cosmos? The answer to that question will determine not just the future of astrology, but the future of human consciousness itself. Because once you start questioning fundamental assumptions about something as basic as the Zodiac, you start questioning everything. And once you start questioning everything, the entire edifice of controlled information begins to crumble. The suppression of Ophiuchus was never just about hiding one constellation. It was about establishing a precedent for limiting human knowledge. It was about proving that entire civilizations could be convinced to forget essential truths about their own nature. It was about demonstrating that consciousness itself could be controlled through information management. For 2,000 years, that precedent has held. Humanity has accepted incomplete information about its cosmic identity because it trusted the authorities who provided that information. But trust, once broken, is difficult to restore. And as more people discover the truth about the 13th zodiac sign, trust in information authorities is beginning to collapse. What emerges from that collapse remains to be seen. But one thing is certain. The age of cosmic ignorance is ending. Whether it ends in chaos or enlightenment depends on how humanity chooses to handle the restoration of its stolen heritage. The stars are waiting to tell us who we really are. The question is whether we're finally ready to listen. The evidence of ongoing suppression becomes even more chilling when you examine what happens to people who begin seriously investigating Ophiuchus influences in their personal lives. Online forums dedicated to the 13th sign report a peculiar pattern. Members who start documenting their healing abilities or spiritual experiences often disappear from the communities without explanation. Their accounts go silent. Their research vanishes from shared documents. Their testimonials are deleted from discussion threads. At first glance, this looks like natural attrition. People lose interest, move on to other topics, abandon projects they started with enthusiasm, but the pattern is too consistent to be random. It specifically affects individuals who move beyond theoretical discussion into practical application of Ophiuchus principles. Those who simply debate the constellations' existence continue participating normally. Those who begin developing actual abilities disappear. This selective targeting suggests something far more sophisticated than casual suppression. Someone or some organization is monitoring these communities, identifying individuals who pose a genuine threat to the established order and taking action to neutralize that threat. The action isn't dramatic. No one is physically harmed or obviously coerced. They simply lose interest, become distracted by other priorities, or convince themselves that their experiences weren't real. The psychological techniques used to achieve this voluntary withdrawal are subtle but effective. Targeted individuals often report sudden changes in their life circumstances that make continued research impossible. Job opportunities arise that require relocation. Family emergencies demand their attention. Health issues develop that drain their energy. Relationships become complicated in ways that consume their emotional resources. Each situation appears completely natural and unrelated to their Ophiuchus investigations, but the timing is always suspicious. Just as someone begins to develop genuine healing abilities or starts documenting evidence that could validate the 13th sign's influence, their life becomes too complicated to continue the work. They're forced to choose between practical necessities and esoteric research. Most choose practicality. This represents a level of social engineering that would have been impossible in ancient times but becomes feasible with modern surveillance and psychological manipulation techniques. If authorities can monitor online activities, identify individuals exploring dangerous knowledge, and then create life circumstances that force those individuals to abandon their investigations, they can maintain suppression without obvious censorship. The beauty of this system is its deniability. No one is being persecuted for their beliefs. No books are being banned. No research is being officially prohibited. People are simply experiencing the normal complications of modern life. The fact that these complications consistently affect Ophiuchus investigators could be dismissed as coincidence by anyone who doesn't see the larger pattern. But for those who do see the pattern, the implications are terrifying. It suggests that the suppression of the 13th zodiac sign is actively maintained by organizations with access to surveillance technology, psychological manipulation techniques, and the ability to orchestrate seemingly natural life events. It suggests that the ancient conspiracy has evolved into something far more sophisticated and invasive than simple information control. Yet, even this advanced suppression system has weaknesses. The most significant weakness is that it depends on people remaining isolated from each other. When Ophiuchus investigators work alone, they're vulnerable to individual targeting. When they form networks and share experiences, they become much harder to neutralize without exposing the suppression mechanism itself. This is why the emergence of encrypted communication channels and decentralized research networks represents such a threat to established control systems. For the first time in centuries, people investigating suppressed knowledge can collaborate without being easily monitored or manipulated. They can compare notes, verify each other's experiences, and develop collective resistance to individual targeting. The response to this emerging resistance has been predictable: escalation. As traditional suppression methods become less effective, new approaches are being deployed. Disinformation campaigns flood online spaces with false information about Ophiuchus, making it difficult to distinguish legitimate research from deliberate distraction. Fake testimonials and fabricated evidence are introduced to discredit genuine discoveries. Provocateurs infiltrate research communities to create conflict and confusion. Most insidiously, controlled opposition movements are established to channel genuine interest in Ophiuchus into harmless directions. These movements acknowledge the constellation's existence but present it in ways that discourage serious investigation. They might focus on superficial personality traits rather than healing abilities. They might emphasize the constellation's newness rather than its ancient suppression. They might frame it as entertainment rather than spiritual development. This controlled opposition serves multiple purposes. It satisfies people's curiosity about the 13th sign without providing access to genuinely transformative knowledge. It creates the illusion that Ophiuchus information is freely available when actually it's carefully filtered. Most importantly, it provides a mechanism for identifying and monitoring individuals who show serious interest in suppressed astronomical knowledge. The sophistication of these modern suppression techniques reveals something crucial about the forces behind the original Ophiuchus concealment. This isn't the work of ancient priests protecting religious doctrine. This isn't the result of medieval scholars making mathematical compromises. This is evidence of an ongoing, organized effort to control human access to certain types of knowledge. The organizations capable of implementing such comprehensive suppression strategies possess resources and capabilities that extend far beyond academic institutions or religious hierarchies. They have access to surveillance technology, psychological manipulation techniques, media influence, and the ability to coordinate activities across multiple countries and cultures. They operate with the kind of long-term planning and institutional continuity that allows projects to continue for millennia. This raises uncomfortable questions about the nature of power structures in human civilization. If suppression of astronomical knowledge requires this level of coordination and resources, what other aspects of human understanding are being similarly controlled? What other potentials are being systematically prevented from developing? What other truths are being hidden behind walls of institutional consensus and cultural programming? The investigation into Ophiuchus suppression has revealed the existence of what researchers are beginning to call the knowledge control matrix, a web of interconnected institutions, technologies, and cultural mechanisms designed to limit human access to transformative information. This matrix operates across multiple dimensions simultaneously: educational, cultural, technological, psychological, and spiritual. Educational institutions ensure that knowledge remains compartmentalized, preventing the kind of interdisciplinary thinking that could expose suppression patterns. Cultural programming creates psychological resistance to ideas that challenge established narratives. Technological systems filter information and monitor those who seek suppressed knowledge. Psychological manipulation techniques redirect individuals away from dangerous investigations. Spiritual suppression prevents people from developing abilities that would make them independent of institutional authority. Each component of this matrix appears legitimate and beneficial when viewed in isolation. Education, culture, technology, psychology, and spirituality are all valuable aspects of human civilization. But when coordinated to limit rather than expand human potential, they become tools of control rather than development. The restoration of Ophiuchus represents more than correcting astronomical records. It represents a direct challenge to the knowledge control matrix itself. If people can reclaim their true cosmic identity despite centuries of suppression, they demonstrate that the matrix is not invincible. If individuals can develop healing abilities and spiritual insights despite systematic discouragement, they prove that human potential cannot be permanently contained. This is why the resistance to Ophiuchus restoration is so intense and sophisticated. It's not just about protecting astrological tradition or maintaining religious doctrine. It's about preserving a system of control that depends on keeping humans ignorant of their true nature and capabilities. But the very intensity of this resistance provides hope. Systems that weren't vulnerable wouldn't need to work so hard to maintain themselves. The fact that enormous resources are being devoted to suppressing knowledge about a single constellation suggests that this knowledge is genuinely dangerous to established power structures. The battle for Ophiuchus is ultimately a battle for human consciousness itself. It's a test of whether our species can overcome artificial limitations that have been imposed on us for millennia. It's a question of whether we can reclaim the cosmic heritage that was stolen before most of us were born. The outcome of this battle will determine what kind of future humanity creates for itself. Will we remain trapped in systems of controlled ignorance, accepting incomplete information about our own nature? Or will we break free from the knowledge control matrix and finally discover what we're truly capable of becoming? The stars themselves are waiting for our answer. Ophiuchus continues to cross the ecliptic every year, regardless of whether we acknowledge its influence. The constellation that was erased from human consciousness 2,000 years ago still shines in the night sky, still affects those born under its influence, still offers its gifts of healing and transformation to anyone brave enough to reclaim them. The only question remaining is whether humanity is finally ready to look up at the stars and see what was always there, waiting patiently for us to remember who we really are. The 13th sign holds the key to unlocking not just individual potential, but the collective awakening of our entire species. And that awakening cannot be stopped by any suppression system, no matter how sophisticated or well-funded. Because consciousness, once awakened, has a momentum all its own. It spreads from person to person, generation to generation, until even the most elaborate systems of control begin to crumble under the weight of revealed truth. The age of cosmic amnesia is ending. The age of conscious awakening has begun, and it all started with one simple question: why are there only 12 zodiac signs when there are clearly 13 constellations along the ecliptic? From that single crack in the official narrative, an entire edifice of hidden truth is beginning to emerge. Human consciousness is far more resilient and creative than any system designed to control it. The suppression of Ophiuchus may have lasted 2 millennia, but it cannot last forever. Truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply it's been buried. Light finds a way to shine, no matter how thick the darkness that tries to contain it. The restoration of the 13th zodiac sign is just the beginning. Once people realize that something this fundamental can be hidden from human awareness, they begin questioning everything else they've been taught. They start looking for other gaps, other inconsistencies, other places where the official story doesn't match observable reality. This process of awakening cannot be contained or controlled. It spreads naturally from person to person, carried by the simple human desire to understand truth about our own nature and potential. No suppression system, no matter how sophisticated, can ultimately prevail against this basic drive for authentic knowledge. The cosmic cover-up is unraveling. The 13th sign is returning to human consciousness, and with it comes the possibility of reclaiming abilities, insights, and potentials that have been hidden from us for far too long. The age of enforced ignorance is coming to an end. The age of conscious co-creation with cosmic forces is about to begin. But what happens when this awakening reaches a critical mass? What occurs when enough people simultaneously discover their true cosmic identity that the collective human consciousness begins to shift? We're approaching that threshold now, and the implications are staggering. Recent studies by underground research networks have identified what they call awakening clusters, geographic regions, where unusually high numbers of people born during the Ophiuchus period are simultaneously discovering their true zodiacal identity. These clusters aren't random. They're forming in areas where the suppression mechanisms are beginning to break down, where information flows more freely, where people have greater access to alternative knowledge systems. Within these clusters, something extraordinary is happening. Individuals who have reclaimed their Ophiuchus identity are beginning to demonstrate abilities that were thought to be mythological. Spontaneous healing is becoming commonplace. Telepathic communication is developing between cluster members. Prophetic dreams are providing accurate information about future events. Most remarkably, these abilities seem to be contagious. They spread from awakened individuals to their friends, family members, and communities. This phenomenon terrifies the architects of the original suppression because it represents their worst nightmare, the restoration of human abilities that make external authority unnecessary. When people can heal themselves and others through direct cosmic connection, they don't need medical institutions. When they can access information through spiritual channels, they don't need educational gatekeepers. When they can communicate telepathically, they can't be monitored or controlled through conventional surveillance. The response has been swift and desperate. New suppression technologies are being deployed, specifically targeting these awakening clusters. Electromagnetic frequencies are being broadcast to disrupt psychic abilities. Chemical compounds are being introduced into local water supplies to dampen spiritual sensitivity. Social media algorithms are being modified to prevent cluster members from finding each other online. But these countermeasures are having an unexpected effect. Instead of stopping the awakening process, they're accelerating it. People who were previously content to explore Ophiuchus concepts intellectually are being forced into direct confrontation with suppression forces. The artificial obstacles are making the cosmic conspiracy impossible to ignore. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a former NASA astronomer who lost her position after publishing research on zodiacal suppression, has been documenting this escalation from her exile in rural Montana. Her underground research facility, funded by anonymous donors who identify as Ophiuchus natives, has become a refuge for scientists investigating suppressed astronomical knowledge. What we're seeing now isn't just the restoration of individual cosmic identity, Vasquez explains in Encrypted Communications. It's the emergence of a new form of human consciousness that operates outside the parameters of conventional reality. These awakened individuals aren't just remembering forgotten abilities, they're developing capabilities that transcend anything recorded in historical accounts. Vasquez's research suggests that the original Ophiuchus natives in ancient times were deliberately prevented from reaching their full potential. The suppression wasn't just about hiding their existence, it was about stopping them from evolving into something that would fundamentally transform human civilization. The abilities emerging in modern awakening clusters represent the natural development that was interrupted 2 millennia ago. The most disturbing aspect of Vasquez's findings is her discovery that the suppression extends beyond Earth itself. Radio telescope data that she acquired before her dismissal from NASA shows artificial interference patterns that coincide with Ophiuchus constellation positions. Someone or something is actively broadcasting signals designed to disrupt the cosmic influences that activate Serpent Bearer abilities. The suppression isn't just historical and cultural, Vasquez reports. It's technological and possibly extraterrestrial in origin. The forces trying to keep humanity locked in cosmic ignorance have resources and capabilities that extend far beyond any earthly organization. We're dealing with something that views awakened human consciousness as a genuine threat to their agenda. This revelation has transformed the Ophiuchus restoration movement from an academic exercise into something resembling a resistance operation. Awakened individuals are no longer content to simply reclaim their personal cosmic identity. They're actively working to expose and dismantle the entire suppression apparatus that has kept humanity in artificial limitation for centuries. The methods being used in this cosmic resistance are unlike anything in recorded history. Instead of physical confrontation or political organizing, awakened Ophiuchus natives are using their developing abilities to directly counter suppression technologies. Groups are forming meditation circles that generate protective energy fields around awakening clusters. Telepathic networks are being established that bypass all conventional communication channels. Healing circles are reversing the effects of chemical and electromagnetic suppression attempts. Most remarkably, these resistance activities are being coordinated without any central authority or formal organization. The awakened individuals seem to be operating through a form of collective consciousness that allows spontaneous coordination across vast distances. Plans emerge simultaneously in multiple locations. Resources appear exactly where they're needed without being requested. Knowledge spreads instantly between connected individuals regardless of physical separation. This organic coordination terrifies the suppression architects because it represents a form of human organization that they cannot infiltrate, monitor, or control. Traditional methods of disrupting resistance movements, infiltration, misinformation, leadership targeting, resource disruption, are useless against a network that operates through consciousness itself. The escalation continues to accelerate. As suppression forces deploy more sophisticated countermeasures, awakened individuals develop more advanced abilities to counter them. As awakening clusters expand and connect with each other, the collective consciousness grows stronger and more creative in its resistance strategies. What began as individuals discovering their true zodiacal identity has evolved into a species-wide battle for conscious evolution. The outcome of this battle will determine whether humanity remains trapped in artificial limitations or breaks free to explore its true potential. The stakes extend far beyond astrology or personal development. They touch on fundamental questions about the nature of human consciousness, our relationship with cosmic forces, and our destiny as a species. But perhaps the most profound realization emerging from this cosmic awakening is that the suppression of Ophiuchus was never really about controlling astrology. It was about preventing humanity from discovering that consciousness itself is the fundamental creative force in the universe. The Serpent Bearer represents not just healing abilities or spiritual sensitivity, but the recognition that human awareness is capable of directly influencing reality at the quantum level. This understanding transforms everything. If consciousness can affect physical reality, then the limitations we accept as natural law become nothing more than conditioned beliefs. If awakened awareness can heal bodies, transmit information, and coordinate complex activities without physical mechanisms, then the entire framework of materialistic science becomes obsolete. The implications ripple through every aspect of human civilization. Medicine must acknowledge that consciousness plays a primary role in health and healing. Physics must incorporate awareness as a fundamental force, rather than an emergent property of matter. Psychology must recognize that individual consciousness is connected to a larger field of cosmic intelligence. These paradigm shifts threaten every institution built on the assumption that consciousness is powerless to affect physical reality. Medical establishments that profit from treating symptoms rather than addressing consciousness-based causes of illness. Educational systems that teach people they are separate, isolated individuals in a meaningless universe. Religious institutions that claim exclusive access to spiritual truth while denying the divine nature of human consciousness itself. The restoration of Ophiuchus represents the collapse of consensus reality as we've known it for centuries. It marks the end of the age when humans believed they were victims of circumstances beyond their control, and the beginning of the age when we recognize ourselves as conscious co-creators of our experience. This transition isn't happening smoothly or peacefully. The forces that have maintained human limitation for millennia aren't surrendering without a fight. They're deploying every resource at their disposal to prevent the awakening from reaching critical mass. But their efforts are increasingly desperate and counterproductive. Each suppression attempt generates more awareness of the conspiracy. Each countermeasure awakens more people to their true nature. Each escalation demonstrates more clearly that humanity is dealing with forces that view conscious human evolution as an existential threat to their agenda. The cosmic chess game is approaching its endgame. The pieces have been moving for thousands of years, but now the final strategies are being deployed. On one side, ancient forces of limitation and control, wielding technologies and resources that span solar systems and centuries. On the other side, newly awakened human consciousness, discovering abilities that transcend the laws of physics and the boundaries of individual identity. The outcome remains uncertain, but momentum is building toward a resolution that will transform not just human civilization, but our understanding of reality itself. The 13th Zodiac sign was hidden because it holds the key to unlocking human potential that threatens the very foundation of controlled reality. That key is now being turned by thousands of awakened individuals around the world. The lock is beginning to open, and what emerges from that opening will either liberate human consciousness or trigger a final desperate attempt to slam the door shut forever. So here we stand at the threshold of cosmic awakening, with the stolen 13th sign finally returning to human consciousness. The evidence is overwhelming. The suppression was real. The cover-up was deliberate. And now, as more people discover their true celestial identity, the ancient systems of control are beginning to crack. But this story doesn't end with the restoration of Ophiuchus. It begins there, because once you see how they erased one constellation from human awareness, you start questioning everything else. What other knowledge has been hidden? What other abilities have been suppressed? What other truths are waiting to be rediscovered in the light of awakened consciousness? The Serpent Bearer rises again, not as a symbol of forbidden knowledge, but as a reminder of what we've always been capable of becoming. Sweet dreams, and may you find the courage to look up at the stars and remember who you really are.